Hello aspirants, welcome back, and we are starting over from Oceania. Last time we had stopped at Australia, it was becoming too much, and now we are entering into an area which is somewhat confusing, but we will get through. So, Oceania down under. First of all, we know that Oceania is always called the smallest continent, but look at this area. It is entire continent of Australia, the region of Australia, New Zealand, and these three big regions, Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia, still it is considered to be smallest. Why so? The biggest reason is all of these islands are so small that they are nothing but small dots. Even the markings which I have just made, even these markings are bigger than the actual islands that are shown on this map. So overall, when calculating the area of a land, we take in the land area and not the ocean. So Polynesia, of course, seems to be much more larger than Australia here. But if you look at the islands here, just small Hawaiian islands over here. Then New Zealand is at the bottom. Now this is also sort of confusing that why is New Zealand a part of Polynesia? We'll study this later on. Now, we are now focusing on Oceania as a whole and not in Australia. What had we learned in Australia? We had learned that Australia is a stable continental core. Things are happening around Australia and not within Australia. Now we are entering into Oceania. That is, we are touching non-Australia portions of Oceania. So we'll be studying about how New Zealand is seeing the movement of these tectonic plates and why there are so many islands forming because of ocean collisions some places. At some places we even have continent collisions in the middle of the ocean. So things are about to get a bit tricky, but all in all your concepts in geography will be extremely clear. First of all, New Zealand. So New Zealand has two islands, North and South Islands. So Cook Strait separates North Island and South Island. Okay, just remember here's the Cook Strait. You won't be able to see it in the video, but there is a Cook Strait between the North and the South Island. Okay, just remember that. And the biggest concept of New Zealand is that it is sitting at the boundary of Pacific Plate and the Indo-Australian Plate. The Indo-Australian and the Pacific Plate cuts right through, somewhat like this. And that makes the case of New Zealand extremely interesting because what New Zealand is, it has earthquakes, volcanoes, and glaciers as well. In the same island, there are volcanoes, in the same island, there are glaciers. So that makes New Zealand extremely interesting. It also lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire. In fact, it is damn smack in the middle of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Look at this. This is New Zealand over here. And this, I think I took this image from the National Geographic, so thanks to them. But you see this. I mean, there are very few countries. There is Japan, yes. Then there are a few of the Southeast Asian islands. But New Zealand, which we are talking about, is in the starting point in the middle of the Pacific Ring of Fire. So when I was talking about the oceanic plates, so about New Zealand, you see this line. If I remove this, which I had created earlier, then look at this. Now this is how this plate is moving. South Island is getting like bisected into two, and then this line is coming out over here. So let us see how that explanation goes. So and this side of the screen, if you see on this side, so here I have shown how New Zealand is getting divided. This is the south and the north portions of New Zealand. Northern portion of New Zealand is a region that is full of volcanoes. So northern portion is full of volcanoes. You can see this huge amount of volcanoes. This is the volcano map of New Zealand. And look the number of volcanoes, full of volcanoes over here. So many of them. While in the southern portion, there are just three volcanoes. Three known volcanoes. There might be some more. I don't know about that. But three known volcanoes. Why is that? Because of this. you see the tectonic plate is going through here. There is ocean here, there is continent here, I mean right here. So there is an ocean continent collision going on as we speak. So this ocean continent collision results in ocean continent, like I have been explaining in the last few videos. Ocean continent collision, there is ocean means there is a presence of liquid, and because there is presence of liquid, this is a mnemonic to learn, we must have volcanoes, we must have trenches. So these two will be present. So we have a huge number of volcanoes present in the northern island, not so much in the southern island. But why do we have so many glaciers in the southern island? You see, New Zealand as it is really down south. It is extremely close to Antarctica. So it is extremely cold over there as it is. And we have a huge number of glaciers in the southern island of New Zealand. Ivory Glacier is over here, then there is Mount Cook village, there is a Mount Cook over there, and over here there are a number of glaciers. You must have seen many images of New Zealand where there is glaciers on top and it floats down and there is sea. This is that region of the famous New Zealand images which you see. So why is this happening? Because over here in the middle of the ocean there is a continent collision taking place. Right over here. This is the continent collision of the southern island of New Zealand. So when there is a continent collision, what happens? There is no liquid involved because there is no ocean over here. Ocean, when this must have been forming at that point of time, there must have been an ocean. So once that ocean was there, volcanoes must have been there and then they got dormant or dead or whatever. Now, in the middle of the southern island of New Zealand, there is a continent collision taking place. And what does this continent collision give us? So, continent collision gives us fold mountains, young fold mountains. And guess where is the Southern Alps or the New Zealand Alps? There is a small region over here where we have these so-called Alps of New Zealand. So there are fold mountains forming right here because there is no sinking, there is no subduction zone in this, and things are just rising up. So that's how the young fold mountains are forming, and that's how the Himalayas are also formed. So continent collision in the southern and ocean continent collision in the northern. So like I had said earlier that we'll be seeing a continent collision in the middle of the ocean. This is what I meant. Now I wanted to talk about the Great Barrier Reef. So we know Australia is an extremely dry continent. We read about that a lot. Now we're done with Australia and New Zealand. Just to end it, I'm speaking about the Great Barrier Reef. We know the Great Barrier Reef is the largest coral reef in the world. But why is it next to a dry continent like Australia? The main reason is the East Australian current. Now the East Australian current is a warm ocean current. Because of this, there is the Great Dividing Range here, like we had studied in the previous lecture. Now that results in somewhat a moist region over here. There is some amount of rainfall which is taking place in this region, and because of that what happens is there are very small stream like rivers flowing carrying hardly any silt. So the region over this is extremely stable, not much silt, and corals hate silt. If there is silt, you won't find any corals over there. That's why on the eastern coast of India we do not have much corals, but in the western coast we have some amount of corals. So they need stable warm water. Now this is really close to the southern. Now you see New Zealand, as I said, extremely down south. So how come corals can be found over here? Even this is too south for corals to be forming. It is extremely cold here, but the East Australian current, being a warm current, makes sure that the temperatures are appropriate for the coral reefs to flourish over there. And you know about the tragedy of the Great Barrier Reef. It is the rainforest of the ocean, and it is because of coral bleaching, it is getting decimated. However, the Australian government has come up with a plan called as Reef 2050. This is an enormous plan to put a jump start on the corals and make sure that they are again living up to it. In our environment lectures, we'll be reading about the coral reefs in detail. So, after this, we now enter the big confusion zone, which many UPSC aspirants do not know about, but we'll be studying about these three uh, regions: Micronesia, Polynesia, and Melanesia. Now, many confuse this as countries. These are not countries. These are actually sub-regions. Now, Oceania is a huge region in itself. It's the smallest land region because the number of islands are really small. So, but these regions are huge, and these sub-regions enter into other continents. What we traditionally think is not true. When we speak about, for example, Hawaii, we think it is a part of the USA, so this will be under the North American continent, but it is a part of Oceania. You can Google this and find out. It was shocker to me as well, but that's true. Same goes for Asia. Now, this region over here is a part of Indonesia. Now, there is a completely different story going on between New Guinea. This region is the Papua New Guinea, and this region is called the Indonesia region of the Papua New Guinea. So, this portion of Indonesia, along with all of these islands, comes under Oceania. So, there is a bit of confusion between Oceania, Asia, North America, which we are covering over here in detail. So, let's start. First, we have Micronesia. You don't have to learn everything about here. Micro means what? Small. Micro means small. And Natia is actually a Latin word. It means islands. So this is actually a conglomeration of small islands all across the Pacific. Now, entirely this is called the Pacific, South Pacific, huge islands of the South Pacific. But Micronesia is the small island. So there is a cultural significance to dividing these regions. Micronesia is a conglomeration of many different small countries. Like you have the Palau here, you have the Marshall Islands, then you have the Kiribati. Many of them are US controlled, like Guam and Northern Mariana Islands. What you should remember as a UPSC aspirant is just Mariana Trench and the Philippine Sea. Why? You should know Mariana Trench is not in Asia, it's in Oceania, and it is in the Micronesia region of Oceania. Philippine Sea is important because this separates Micronesia from the Philippines. That's all you need to know. In other words, this separates Oceania from Asia. So that's all you need to remember in Micronesia. Always remember, these are not countries, these are conglomeration of countries. Micronesia is many small islands in one region of the Pacific Ocean. Next, we come across Polynesia. So, Polynesia, Hawaii, the northernmost region of Polynesia is Hawaii. Then there is the East Timor Island over here, and New Zealand in the south. New Zealand is a part of Polynesia. Yes, New Zealand is a part of Polynesia. The main reason for this is that there is a cultural significance to Polynesia. Polynesia, poly means many. So this is a conglomeration of many small islands together. I read that there is a cultural and language roots similarity, not the same language, but the root is same. So that's how they had come up with these regions, obviously made by European explorers just to screw with our lives. But Hawaii Islands in the north, New Zealand in the south, and some islands over there in the far east. In fact, this region, this particular island over here, is under the control of Chile of South America. So you see, this almost every other continent is kind of overlapping with Oceania. We will read about that later as well. So Hawaii we have in the north, New Zealand over here, and Polynesia is the largest sub-region of Oceania. You just need to remember that largest region in Oceania. That's it. You don't have to remember anything else. Finally, Melanesia. Now, Melanesia is the most important of all three, especially because it is close to Australia and it is close to Indonesia. Finally, you need to know about Fiji because of the Indian diaspora. One of the biggest Indian diasporas is in Fiji, and that forms in Melanesia, right over here. It borders the Polynesia region over here, and that's where Fiji Islands are. PNG is Papua New Guinea, right over here. So Papua New Guinea is very important because it is always in news with Indonesia. There is some amount of tension going on between the two countries. What separates Papua New Guinea from Australia? There is the Arafura Sea, as we had read earlier, but there is also the Torres Strait. There is the Torres Strait between the two, and a lot of illegal migration takes place through the Torres Strait. And that is it. But one thing I would still say is that, let me get back over here. So, Hawaii Islands, New Zealand, and some island, East Timor Islands, perhaps it is present over there. I wanted to give you the list of those continents and what regions they are in overlapping or getting confused. Easy to get confused between Oceania and those other continents. So, first we have the North American continent. So, North American continent is over here. Now, North American continent, confusion is Hawaii. Hawaii is not in North America. Hawaii is in Oceania. Clear? Next, we have South American island. South American continent is over here, somewhere, down this direction. South American continent, there is a few islands, East Timor and other islands are present over here, which do not belong to South America but actually belong to Oceania. Finally, we have Asia. Asia, as you can see, starts from right here. Indonesia is here and Asia will form right here. So, Asia, a part of Indonesia, Indonesian islands form a border with Papua New Guinea and the Oceania regions. So, that is it for Australia and Oceania. If you have any confusion, you can always visit me in my office hours, and you can always shoot me an email if you have any confusion. We'll be more than happy to resolve that. Next up is Africa. So we'll be studying Africa tomorrow, and that's it. Thank you.